Okay, so why do people find it so hard to change behaviours? Well, I think there's three common issues there that we identify. The first one is what I refer to as a concept called double loop learning. And what I mean by that is that most of us never go back to challenge our model of the world. So if I give you a practical example, I sometimes demonstrate this by showing people a picture of Susan Boyle and ask how many people recognise who it is. The reason we remember Susan Boyle is because when a 46-year-old lady with mental health issues turns up on a stage of a show like that declaring she wants to sing like Elaine Page, most people assumed that she'd be dreadful. But the reason that we remember Susan Boyle is because we were all, those of us that watched it, forced to go back to our view of the world and ask ourselves, was it fair, was it balanced, was it reasonable? And the fact that we do it all too rarely means we remember her all too readily. So the first issue is about, are we constantly prepared to go back and challenge and open our own mind to a different way? The second issue we get is we get trapped in what I describe as the knowledge trap. We think that technical knowledge is enough. So for example, a doctor, for example, will study for 7 years to understand how to diagnose a problem. But how much training do they get in being able to explain to a layperson what the issue is? The third issue that I see is courage. Because often it requires real courage to go against the flow, challenge convention. And for something like that, that's a decision that only comes through passion or genuinely believing it and being prepared to defy convention. And a lot of people just take the path of least resistance rather than have the willingness to go and challenge the convention. So why do people find it hard to change health behaviours? Well, I often think the answer is because we try and frighten people into changing their behaviours for health. So you don't have to think too deeply about, say, the anti-smoking adverts or the current anti-obesity sort of campaigns that you see going on. And it's all about frightening people in terms of giving them images of like black and gnarled lungs that smoking causes, or showing how diabetes and heart disease are a result of overeating. Now what we know is if you frighten people, you will get that short-term burst of activity. But what we're talking about in terms of health is a sustained longer-term approach. And I think what needs to be done there is tell people the benefits of it rather than the consequences of it. Give people a picture of what's good about it rather than what's bad about making these changes. So the second reason is very much about make it short term rather than tell people that it needs to be exercising 3 times a week, an hour each time. Give people challenges to exercise in 5-minute bursts, for example, or give people smaller plates to eat portions of, and make change something that's easy and the path of least resistance rather than make it something that's daunting that we have to add into our agendas. So are there any tactics that companies can use to engage their consumers to adopt different behaviours? The first one I'd suggest is translate it into behavioural terms. So often we talk in abstract concepts and our brain just isn't used to dealing with abstract terms. So for example, when we talk about obesity, obesity is an abstract term. But if you translate what causes obesity in behavioural terms, we talk about overeating or eating the wrong kind of food. So start to make behavioural change tangible behaviours that we can understand and adopt rather than talk in abstract terms. The second tactic is stop frightening people, because frightening people just produces that short-term adrenaline to run away from a problem. Start giving people the benefits and start extolling what's good about it and what people will gain from adopting healthy behaviours rather than what the consequences of not doing it seem to be. And the third principle is actually emotionally engage people. Don't talk in very logical terms. I mean, the obvious example I sometimes talk to people is say, what's the worst time to go food shopping? And the answer is when you're hungry. Because your emotional brain hijacks you and you're not capable of making strategic long-term decisions, what you're going to eat for dinner next week. You're only interested in what you can eat in the next 2 minutes. So if we understand the power of our emotional brain, it's how do you engage people emotionally to really want to make the change? And that links to the second point, which is give people a picture of what the world can look like rather than what it doesn't, but extol it using tangible, practical behaviours and link it to the power of emotions.